Sideways.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of the situation we're diving into today.
Okay.
With this Barclays report that you sent over.
All right.
It's all about the Fed's next interest rate move. So are they going to tiptoe, tiny cut?
Yeah.
Or are they going full send, big cut?
Right.
And the thing is, the market seems to be betting on this big, splashy move, even though all the economic data is kind of like, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like everyone's trying to guess what's happening, like behind the kitchen doors,
What's really interesting here is the Fed,
Yeah.
they usually like to keep things pretty predictable. Like they signal their intentions pretty clearly,
Right.
Don't want to burn dinner.
Right, exactly.
But this time it seems like their usual transparency has kind of gone out the window.
Mm.
And the Barclays report really highlights how that's creating like this air of mystery,
Okay, so unpack this for us. For those of us who haven't, memorized every single Fed meeting minute,
Right.
what's actually at stake here? Why does a rate cut, big or small, even matter?
So the Federal Reserve, or as everyone calls it, the Fed,
Right.
they're kind of like the conductor of the U.S. economy, right?
Okay.
So they raise interest rates to cool down inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think about lowering the flame when the pan's about to overheat,
Okay.
and they lower rates to try to stimulate growth,
Uh-huh.
it's like adding a bit of fuel to the fire.
So it's all about finding that sweet spot, like the Goldilocks temperature for the economy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the Barclays report, it lays out all this data really clearly.
Okay.
Inflation, it's cooling down.
Okay.
But some areas like, core services,
Yeah.
they're staying kind of stubbornly high.
Okay.
The job market's looking pretty strong. Unemployment's low.
Mm-hmm.
No major job losses.
Got it.
And then on top of all of that, consumer spending is actually up.
Really?
So it's not exactly like this five-alarm fire situation where you'd expect like really drastic measures.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly scream a slam on the brakes.
Exactly.
Which is what makes the market reaction so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because the report actually quotes a few Fed officials.
Right.
And they all seem, pretty calm and collective.
Yeah.
They're saying they're watching the data. They're ready to adjust if they need to. Sounds pretty standard, right?
Right.
Right.
But then it's like someone went to like a silent retreat and just whispered 50 basis point cut.
Right.
And suddenly everyone's like, that's it. That's the secret.
It's true. Even in the report, they point to these specific articles, right?
Yeah.
Wall Street Journal, the FT, Washington Post, all kind of hinting at this larger cut.
Yeah.
And then suddenly everyone's convinced that's like the winning lottery number.
Even though the data itself hasn't really changed all that much, it's like the recipe says simmer.
Right, right.
But everybody's prepping for a full-on flambe.
Yeah.
So what are we missing here?
Right.
Were there like secret backroom deals?
Yeah.
Invisible ink messages? Like what's going on?
Yeah.
We've got to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
So the Fed is stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Like the
Right.
data.
Yeah. As you said, not exactly flashing red.
Yeah.
And then this market frenzy, everybody's like, no, they're gonna go big. They're going bold. It's enough to make your head spin.
Yeah. It's a really fascinating kind of dilemma they're in, right?
Yeah.
So on the one hand, you have this argument for the cautious approach,
Okay.
the 25 basis point cut.
Mm-hmm.
This is like the data-driven approach, right? You're adjusting the seasoning gradually. You're
Yeah.
tasting as you go.
Yeah.
And this path kind of signals that the Fed's still, keeping a close eye on inflation.
Right.
Not quite ready to just, fully declare victory.
Like they're still a little worried about oversalting the dish.
Exactly. Now, the counter-argument,
Yeah.
the case for the big 50 basis point cut
Okay.
hinges on this idea of preemptive action.
Right.
Okay. So the report highlights how concerned the Fed is about the economy slowing down.
Right.
They don't want to,
Yeah.
wait till the pot's gone cold to
Right.
realize, oh, we should have turned up the heat a little bit.
So better to overcorrect than undercorrect.
Kind of, yeah.
Rip the Band-Aid off, hope for the best.
In a sense, yeah.
Okay.
And then the report throws in this other interesting point,
Okay.
which is that because financial conditions have already eased,
Okay.
mortgage rates are kind of trending down, the stock market's doing its thing.
Right.
A 50 basis point cut now wouldn't be as dramatic as it would have been, say, a couple months ago.
Right.
It's like everyone's kind of mentally prepared for a bit more of a, shakeup.
Okay, so like everyone's braced for it a little bit more now.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, I see the logic there. This is where I get a little lost, though.
Okay.
You mentioned the Fed's dot plot earlier.
Yeah.
It's like the roadmap, right, for future cuts.
Right.
So how does this big 50-point cut right now square with what they've already put out there? Like, are they veering completely off-road?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right.
Because a 50 basis point cut now would definitely be a deviation from the path they've projected.
Right.
And it would, raise some eyebrows, to say the least.
Right.
I think it comes down to how much faith does the Fed have in their own forecasts at this point?
Right.
And are they willing to maybe risk, a little bit of credibility to address these kind of market whispers,
So it's not even just about, is the soup too hot or too cold? It's like, is the chef willing to admit that they maybe misread the recipe a little bit?
Right.
And then what happens if people start to doubt their cooking skills?
Yeah, and that's the real crux of it.
Right.
If the Fed deviates too far from the guidance they've given,
Yeah.
it could introduce a level of uncertainty and unpredictability
Mm-hmm.
into the market.
Right.
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 And nobody really likes a side of volatility
No.
with their economic forecast.
Right, exactly. And this is where I feel like that confused diner
Uh-huh.
who's trying to read the menu,
Yeah.
and everyone else seems to just get it. So let's break this down for those of us at home who are like, wait, hold on.
Okay.
You're listening to all this talk about interest rates and the Fed. What does it actually mean for, like, your life,
Yeah.
for your wallet? All right, so let's translate all of this Fed drama into real-world scenarios.
Okay.
So let's say they play it safe. They
Mhm.
go by the book. They opt for that smaller 25 basis point cut.
Right.
What's the message? What are they saying to folks at home?
Well, I think the message there is it's like watching a pot simmer,
Okay.
They're still being cautious.
Right.
Still a little bit worried about, inflation like bubbling up again.
Right.
They're keeping a close eye on things, but they're not quite ready to like fully let their guard down.
Yeah, they're not convinced that burner's totally off.
Exactly.
Just dialed down a bit.
Right.
Okay, so for like the average person's finances, what does that mean?
So that could mean that, hopes of getting like a crazy low mortgage rate might have to be adjusted a little bit.
Right.
Or that, credit card interest rates might not budge as much as some people might be hoping for.
Right.
It's a little bit of a waiting game at that point.
Okay, so smaller cut, tap the brakes on those big financial decisions.
Yeah, for a bit longer.
For a little bit longer. Got it. Okay, flip the script.
Okay.
Full send, 50 basis point cut, big, bold move.
Mm-hmm.
What happens?
So in the short term, it could be like a jolt of energy to the system, right?
Mhm.
Like you were saying, you rip off the Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It might encourage businesses to invest a little bit more,
Okay.
maybe entice some consumers to open their wallets a bit.
So a temporary boost, like a flash sale for the economy.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
There's always a but.
There's always a but, right?
Always a cat. The report does caution that such a dramatic move
Yeah.
could introduce like some volatility into the markets. Like, shaking up that snow globe a little bit.
Right.
Things might be a little unpredictable for a while
Right.
before they settle down.
So buckle up. Could be a bumpy ride for a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
But you mentioned earlier the Fed's decision, big or small, it's only one ingredient in this whole economic stew.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we have to remember the global landscape is constantly shifting.
Right.
Geopolitical events.
Yeah.
Supply chain issues.
Right.
Even, the price of coffee beans in Brazil can impact things.
Right. So the Fed could nail this.
Right.
And then something totally crazy could happen that throws everything off.
It's like trying to predict the weather, right? The forecast might say, sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
And then some rogue storm system rolls in.
Okay. So with all of that in mind,
Yeah.
what are people supposed to do with all this? What's the takeaway?
Well, I think, knowledge is power, right?
Right.
So stay informed.
Okay.
Pay attention to what's happening in the economy, but,
Yeah.
don't let it sink you into a tailspin.
Don't freak out.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to making your own decisions about your finances,
Yeah.
remember, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Right. It's about the long game,
Exactly.
not just this one decision.
And, don't be afraid to reach out to a financial advisor.
Right.
If you need help kind of navigating these waters.
Yeah. Solid advice. Now, this Barclays report, it's given us a lot to think about.
It has.
But there's one thing that I keep coming back to, which is how much the Fed hates to surprise the markets.
Right.
But in this day and age, rumors, they just spread like wildfire.
They do.
So can they actually avoid it?
That's a good question.
And is a surprise always a bad thing?
Right.
I think it's something to ponder as we wait and see what the Fed's going to do. It's almost like the element of surprise is
Yeah.
part of the recipe
It
now.
kind of is, yeah. Little dash of intrigue.
A little dash of intrigue. All right, well, on that note, we will definitely be keeping our eyes peeled
Yeah.
for any smoke signals coming from the Fed. A big thank you to you
Thank you.
for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been fun.
And to all of you listening, stay curious.